Hey y'all, back with another one. Bearded Boys here, ready to talk to you about Final Fantasy VIII and the Junction System. Now, a lot of people that are familiar with the Final Fantasy games, we're not a fan of the Junction System. They didn't really understand it, but it does tie into some of the themes of the game, which if you've played the game, you understand there's different themes like fate, predestination, how war can affect an entire generation even afterwards, because storyline wise in the game, 20 years before the game, there was this thing called the Sorcerer's War. So most of the younger generation are all orphans. Like, you play as a guy, you play as Squall Leonhard. His dad was one of the soldiers in that war. You don't know this for a while, they don't tell you, but spoiler alert for those that ain't played this game that came out during the fucking 90s. Laguna is Squall's dad. They never flat out say it, but it's pretty well verified that Laguna is Squall's dad, Alone is his adopted sister, and yeah, Rain is his mom. Get it? Yeah. Now, Squall, everyone else you play as, unfortunately, they're kind of could be seen as child soldiers, which is, a little messed up, but no biggie. This is a video game, it's not the real world, so we can kind of blow past stuff like that. Now, one of the main things of the game that's really one of the main themes that isn't really discussed a lot is memory. Now, memory plays a big part in this game. Not that you have to memorize things or anything like that, but memory plays such a huge part because if anybody's actually played a Final Fantasy game, there's usually there's Ifrit, Gilgamesh, Shiva, and all the rest. Now, certain games are called summons. Final Fantasy X, they're called Aeons. In Final Fantasy VIII, they're called Guardian Forces or GF. Now, to use these Guardian Forces, sometimes you have to beat them in battle and you get to own them. Sometimes they just join you, you find them places, different things. But they explain in the game that to use their power, the GF becomes a part of you, and it takes place, it essentially takes residence in the spot of your brain, the part of your brain that controls memory. So they explain in the game that, you and all of your party members actually all grew up in the same orphanage together when you were little kids, but some of you got adopted by different families and went off to do different things, and they kind of all lost that memory because using GFs, the Guardian Forces, has affected some of their memories. Now, this doesn't, gameplay wise, it doesn't bother you whatsoever. You don't lose abilities or anything like that for a certain time, like using the summons or anything. But that was the storyline wise, as the explanation as to why none of them remembered that they, all grew up together. But then later in the game, you actually find out certain characters like Irvine, who hasn't been using Guardian Forces as much as the rest of your party has, actually does remember. So when he first sees you, he's actually trying his best to play cool, but he actually does remember you guys from when he was a kid. Certain other people do, like Cypher. That's one of the reasons why he remembers but doesn't remember, but that's one of the reasons why he has such a problem with Squall in the first place, because he's like, hey, I remember something back in the past. I just not a fan of you, man. Crybaby. It's something about you I don't like. So the junction system, how that ties into memory is that with the GFs, if you don't junction a GF in that game, you cannot use any abilities whatsoever. The only thing you can do when it comes to a actual fight, of course the random battles that you get into in a Final Fantasy game, the only thing you can do is attack. That's literally all it'll be. Your entire box there that says for your abilities will just be gray and say nothing but attack, because seemingly without GFs, without the Guardian Forces, we don't really remember. Even if it's like you've done something before, but you don't really remember. It's like having that mental block. Like I know I've done this before. I've done this 1,000 times, but I can't remember how to do it right now. It's a lot like that. And with magic, with your abilities, everything, it all ties into the GFs and their ability to grant you power. Now, storyline wise, instead of having, where most of the Final Fantasy games you have a magic point system or MP that allows you to do all your spells and everything, this one had the junction system, and a draw system for your magic, to where you can pull magic from other enemies, pull magic from different things called draw points that you can find throughout the world. But you would just, get magic from different places. You can create magic by synthesizing certain items and breaking them down. It will make magic for you, so you use that. Now, sorry about that. I got friends texting while I'm trying to shoot this video. This is the first time I've done it on this setup, so that's why it's being such a bother. Now, the magic system, which ties, I know it sounds like I'm rambling a little bit, but it actually ties into the whole thought of memory. With the magic system, instead of having that MP system where you can use any spell unless you want, as long as you have enough energy to use it, this one is more, every time you use a magic spell, like you get a certain amount. Like let's say you draw 15 fire spells from a draw point or from an enemy or something. And now at that point you can use fire. You can use those fire spells as much as you want to until they run out. Like if you draw 15 fire spells, you can only use fire 15 times. So, and it's kind of like after you use that 15, it's not that, Squall or whoever you're playing as completely forgot how to do it. It's like that mental block, like I said before, like, oh, I know how to do this, but I can't do it. It's a lot like that. So the junction system, as it ties deeply into the overarching theme of the game of memory and remembering your past. It is because the majority of the game is Squall being a loner. He feels like he doesn't need anyone because he's going through the majority of his life alone. He doesn't remember who his real mother is. He doesn't remember who his dad is. The only person he does know from his past that he's actually related to is Alone, and he only really remembers her. I'm sorry, her name's not Alone, but it's spelled L-O, like Alone. It's weird, but that's the only person that he really remembers from his past, and he doesn't even remember her all the way. It's more like he knows he had a big sister, but he doesn't really remember her all like that. Like, it's like if you were like a 5-year-old kid and then just lost all of your family except for your sister, but then you never saw your sister again for 15 years. You might start to, especially with something affecting your mind, you might start to think I know I have a sister. I know I have a sister, but I don't really remember what she looks like or what her name is. It's a little bit like that. But the junction system is actually tied very deeply to the game. Now there are people that hate the junction system so much they have literally played full-on playthroughs of this game with no junction system at all, which makes it actually pretty hard, damn near, I won't say impossible, but pretty hard to beat the game without using the junction system, because that's where all of your powers and abilities come from. Because the leveling system in Final Fantasy VIII isn't the same as how it is in most of the Final Fantasy games, where you gain power by leveling, you're constantly getting stronger. You can level up, you still gain experience, and you level up and everything in this game, but the majority of your actual strength, abilities, power, and everything comes from the junction system, junctioning magic to your stats, your abilities, getting more power and abilities from your GFs. That's where the majority of it ties into. So, for those of you who think Final Fantasy VIII isn't one of the best ones, I think you're wrong. It's one of the best ones in the whole series. Not a series that has 157 games, 16 movies, and 13 TV shows. It's kind of crazy that Final Fantasy VIII is the top. Now, granted, yes, that is a massive exaggeration, but still, Final Fantasy VIII is one of the best in the entire series. Hands down, even still to this day. And honestly, it's still one of the fastest selling video games on the market, ever, including competing with other Final Fantasy games. So, yeah. But that's my take on Final Fantasy and the junction system. Let me know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that good jazz. And I'll see you later.